And we'll be recording today's masterclass. So I will send a recording link, as well as information on how you can learn more about Chirag and Mission Matters. He's really doing impactful work. So with that, I think we'll get started. I'll go ahead and introduce Chirag. And for anyone who was in our previous masterclass featuring Stacey Havener on the power of storytelling, she gave me this big lesson, and all of us, I mean, these are all really so we can learn collectively, but she teased me because I literally was about to read her bio, and she's like, no, like, we're storytellers, we're building our brand, let us tell our own stories. So rather than just, read Chirag's bio, which I did send to everyone when you registered for the masterclass, instead I'll talk about how we met. So Chirag and I are really fortunate to have met in person through a mutual friend, David Homan, who also presented to our community earlier this year on the power of relationships. And his group, Orchestrated Connecting, has some really unique conferences where people in the family office community, people, movers and shakers, thought leaders really come together to see how we can offer value. It's like, how do you give before you take? And that's where I met Chirag. And we've really been supporting and following each other's work ever since. He is the co-founder in a business, Mission Matters. His partner, Adam Torres, also doing incredible work. Featured me on a podcast. We'll share more about how you guys can participate with their company and be featured on a podcast. It's really awesome. But rather than my telling, Chirag's story, I would love to turn it over to him. And before he dives right in and, teaches everything about, building your brand and becoming a celebrity in your space, Chirag, are you able to just kind of share a little bit more about your journey in co-founding Mission Matters and what you do there?
Yeah, absolutely. Hey, everyone. Good to see you all here this morning. And thanks again, Danielle, for having me. A huge fan of the family office list. So quick, I guess just background on me, just to build up a little context, is I'm born and raised in LA, grew up in the Glendale-Lackawanna area, ended up going to college at USC. And while I was a student there, one of my friends started a nonprofit teaching financial education to high school students. I brought that program to USC, volunteered there. So all 4 years running that program. And that ended up becoming my first job out of college, officially. And so was living in Chicago at the time. I have a really hard name to pronounce. And so my colleagues used to call me Chirago in Chicago, for those of you, just a little FYI, in terms of pronunciation. And so I lived there for 2 years, and I remember Facebook introduced advertising on their platform. We spent $50 on some Facebook ads. I remember we got some $100 back in donations on this Kickstarter campaign we were running. And that happened several times. So about 10 years ago, I had my big light bulb moment, realizing that Facebook was going to transform the entire advertising agency, or the entire advertising industry. And so I ended up leaving the nonprofit, started a social media agency. And one of my friends wanted to start a luxury publication, like a Robb Report, but skewing a little bit younger. And so within 6 months, we took the platform that was non-existent to reaching over 20 million people a month. We had a lot of content go mega viral. And we were trying to figure out how to monetize this. I learned about the media industry, just, learning, I guess, trial by fire. And so reviewed and researched Forbes and every publication that existed. And part of something that we knew was that you kind of had to host events. You needed to build a community around what you're doing. And so we started hosting events, and I think we produced 500 events while I was there. And I was a part owner in this from, I want to say 2014 until mid 21. I ended up selling my stake back to one of the partners in the company. And COVID kind of killed that business. And so while I was trying to figure out what to do in between, I still had my social media agency, which became a full marketing company. What I realized 10 years ago when we started going very viral is that every individual and every company is a media brand, whether you're taking advantage of it or not, or knowing how the platforms or how just marketing and branding work in general. And so one of my clients was actually, who also advertised in our luxury publication, Adam, my co-founder. He used to be a financial advisor in his past life. He went from working for a really large financial advisory firm, or one of the large banks, to starting his own practice. And during that transition, we came up with a strategy. It made sense for him to write a book. And basically he kind of knew, and we would have discussions about this, that for him, in order to separate himself from all the other financial advisors that exist, he had to become more of a celebrity figure in his space. His goal was to build a multi-billion-dollar practice. And so in order to do that, he had to build up his thought leadership. So number one, we had him write a book, and was a total pain in the butt, took a lot longer than we anticipated, but paid off. He used the book as a business card, which allowed him to get many speaking opportunities. And he'll tell you this, he ended up getting one speaking gig that paid him some 5-figure sum, and flew him out for like the weekend, and he got, he did the presentation, got I think a client or two out of that as well. So it just kept piggybacking off of it. A year and a half later, after that first book, we realized that he needed to keep building the brand. And so we ended up launching a podcast for him. I informed Adam, I said, if you launch a podcast or video podcast, we can transform this and build an entire media brand around it, just because of a lot of the things that you could do with that, which I'll explain in more detail in a second. So that podcast developed, we ended up working on a second book for him. And that, knowing, I guess, what we kind of knew after publishing the first book, the second book, we just brought in 15 authors. Each of us wrote a chapter in that book. We built a community around it. And that's really what started Mission Matters by accident. We realized everything we were doing for him and turning him more into a celebrity figure, we could do for others. And so fast forward to today, Mission Matters in a nutshell, there's two components. We're a full media platform, reach a couple million people a month now through our platform. We've interviewed over 6,500 executives, founders of companies, CEOs, investors of various types, sharing their story. Our mission essentially being to amplify that story and helping them accomplish that mission. And so we have an entire media platform, host a variety of events to build a community. And then we also have a personal brand accelerator. And so we launched an 8-week program to help people really build out their personal brands, and then help them publish books, launch podcasts for them, manage some social media accounts, help them with some PR, provide them speaking opportunities. So built out a whole ecosystem to really turn people into celebrities in their respective spaces, which is exactly, I guess, what the topic is going to be about.
Amazing. Like, I love that you guys have taken your collective journeys of, 20 plus years and all this that you've learned through really your own trial and error and your own successes. And you're like, let's share this with the world. And I love that you use this to not just, help individual clients. You're like building a community. And I loved, the whole experience with Adam doing the podcast, because it's amplifying your message and how you're making a difference in the world. And for some people who are introverts, they'd never like go out and do that on their own, but you're giving people the means, you're giving them the path and how they can, really amplify what they're doing. So I love the journey. I'm so glad. It would never have come the same from me just reading a bio. So thank you for sharing that. It's fascinating. I even learned new things about you I didn't know. So awesome. Well, I can't wait. I'm super excited for what you're going to share with us. I'm taking notes. A lot of people don't think I'm an introvert. I've like really consciously had to start becoming more active on LinkedIn and more active in, even just engaging with, our community here. But it's continuously evolving. And I just think I love the way you guys really use your expertise to help folks like me and everyone on this call. So
awesome. Well, why don't I get started? So I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
All right, fantastic. So today's topic is building basically personal branding mastery. The topic really is how to skyrocket your income by impacting, with your impact and your influence. So it's really becoming more of a celebrity figure. When I say celebrity figure, it's more of a thought leader in your respective industry. I mean, everything that I'm going to be sharing, we've helped over 1,000 clients, virtually every industry that I can think of. And so a lot of the tidbits may be a little bit more generalized. Some of the examples might be, but it should actually be able to translate in your industry too. So kind of shared my bio, so I don't want to dive into that, but essentially people buy from brands that they know and trust, and personal connection is the key to making purchasing decisions, especially now. I think we all, especially in the social media world that we all live in, whether it's LinkedIn or TikTok or YouTube, essentially people buy from other people that they know, like, and trust. And so had some, worked with some notable folks like Richard Branson, one of the big fun projects that I had a chance to work on previously. So I kind of highlighted this, but Mission Matters is just a little bit about the brand itself. Reach about 1 million plus people. We published over 300, almost 400 authors now, and our podcast has been viewed over 20 million times with some of our syndication partners. So what bottom line is, whatever you're doing in business, you need a strong personal brand. And I believe that's truer now more than ever. Me being in marketing the last decade or so that I've been doing this, essentially, the more that you have a personal brand, the more I feel like people will naturally understand how and why you started what you're doing. And you'll naturally get your community because people will just self-select and follow you that way. So bottom line, the whole point of building a personal brand is it really tells people who you are, and it allows you to have a face to the company. So think, Tesla, Elon Musk, Richard Branson with Virgin, Steve Jobs with Apple, right? I mean, those are more larger examples, but I think this even translates into just about every industry, whether you're in legal, you're in accounting, you're a doctor, you're a founder of a company, of a lifestyle brand. It translates to this. And so one of our examples is Noelle Randall. She's a really big social media influencer that's worked with us. She wanted our help to fine tune her brand. She felt like she was 80-90% of the way there. She wanted to get there to take it to the next level. Part of it is she hadn't really published a book before. And so we ended up helping her publish a book to really brand her more as a thought leader. And so she has an amazing coaching program. She has a real estate coaching program, and she runs a whole real estate syndication investment business that we've been able to help her with.
Wow.
So really what it allows you to do is it defines your entire reputation, and it sets you apart from others. So similar to that example that I shared with Adam, who used to be a financial advisor in his past life, there's a lot of financial advisors that exist, right? And so for me, if I'm a consumer and I'm trying to select a financial advisor because I need some help managing my money, how do I know who's the right person to trust, right? Sometimes I may ask other friends for referrals. I'm going to research online. I think nowadays everyone's going to Google who you are, right? And they're going to find out. And so part of this whole personal branding thing is it allows you to put a face to your name, right? And so if you're going to manage my money, that's for me is probably one of the, requires the highest level of trust. And I have to know that you're very professional and you're probably one of the best at doing what you do. And I feel like that applies to just about every industry. And so another example, Elliot, who's another financial advisor that we worked with, he manages close to $1 billion. He has a unique story. We actually just had him do a keynote speech about a couple of weeks ago here in LA, but he's based in San Francisco, Silicon Valley. He runs, unfortunately, he has more of a tragic situation where his son committed suicide about 9 years ago. And he launched a foundation teaching really to help teenagers with anxiety and depression. They've impacted hundreds of thousands of teenagers since launching this. And there's a lot of tools, resources. What it's allowed him to do is really build up his story and fine tune it, because what it was and is a tragic situation, he's turned it as part of his superpower because it's part of his authentic story. And that's really what we're trying to do is you don't want to fake it and try to fake who you are. I feel like in the long term, people will be able to sniff it up, and be able to see. What you want to do is be able to find your authentic voice for who you are, and then build off of that, the same way that Elliot's been able to do. And so it's part of his story. It's part of his journey. And so the first most important lesson is to really identify who you serve. This is getting into the weeds of who is your target audience. And you need to know as much about your audience as possible, the demographic information, the socioeconomic, conditions, the psychographs. You want to know what locations they're based in, what are their age ranges, whether they're higher net worth, is this a mass market product? Essentially, the more specific that you can get, the better it'll be. And so when identifying your audience, you want to be as specific as possible. It'll allow you to create a more authentic connection with your people. So I'll give you a very specific example. Let's say if you have a health medical device company and you need to work with doctors, right? So all of the marketing collateral, everything would be specifically, targeting doctors of all sorts. Now, if you can be a little bit more specific, right? I think there's like 150,000 or so doctors, or hundreds of thousands of doctors that exist. But let's say you are targeting doctors in California. And now let's say you get a little bit more specific and you want to target heart doctors, cardiologists. And so just California cardiologists alone, just those two key variables right there, you can get from hundreds of thousands of people to maybe less than tens of thousands of people. It could be 5,000 to 10,000 people right there. The reason why that's important is because all of your marketing and your sales collateral and your materials will all be focused and use the word cardiologists and heart doctors. So now you can go on LinkedIn and you can target cardiologists that live in California, and you might find, a few thousand doctors that are right there. So now you can run a targeted advertising campaign just for cardiologists. All of your sales material, you would want to include the word cardiologist all across the board. The photos that you use in all of your advertising and your sales and your marketing campaigns should include a stethoscope or an EKG machine, anything that's relevant to cardiologists, because it really narrows your focus and it'll get cardiologists that are seeing these advertisements. Even if you're doing a cold outreach email, it's just so targeted that you're going to get an increase in open rate. So it just increases your odds for conversion. The more niche, the more specific that you can get. So you really want to understand who is your target audience. I'll give you an example for Mission Matters. We know that our audience are three types of people. There's business professionals like doctors and lawyers and CPAs. There are founders of companies. And then there are the C-level executives of Fortune 500 companies. That's our clientele base. All of the content, if you go on our podcast channels, you'll see it's only focused on interviewing those types of people. All of our marketing collateral is only focused on those three types of people. All of the events we host and produce and the community we're building is attracting those types of people as well. And so it just runs over and over again. And naturally, we're getting referrals from other folks who understand that that's usually who we work with. And so you want to get us targeted in that capacity as much as you can. And so Tyler DeBra, he's one of our clients that we work with. He runs a private equity fund, and he's focused on working with real estate investors. And he has several cities that he focuses on more than others. And so a lot of the content and everything that we helped him with when he published his story in his book was more geared towards connecting with those types of people. So just giving you another example. And part of his whole brand is to spread positivity, love, and service. And so that was part of his authentic voice. And so we made sure that that got across when we helped him publish his book. So number two, now you want to define your brand identity. So once you understand who your target audience is, now it's up to you to really figure out who are you, what are you doing, and why are you doing it in the first place, essentially. And so in order for branding to work, it has to be consistent. And if there's any break in direction, then this can kind of cost you your audience's trust. And so what you want to do is just be consistent about creating the content. And so firstly, you want to start off with the brand statement and the tagline. So you want to start off with essentially, what is your mission? I mean, let's just, our company's called Mission Matters. So what's your mission and why does it matter to you? What you really want to do is hone in on your mission statement and your vision statement. And you want to be as straightforward and as simple as possible. So you can use this tagline as a quick summary. So our tagline is, we amplify stories. And you'll see that across the board. I mean, that's essentially what we do. And then the statement tells people in a very simple language, 3 words, right? What you do and why you do it. In short, if I were to summarize myself, so my personal mission outside of Mission Matters is I want to help people identify what their mission is. Mission Matters is a company that helps amplify that mission. And for me, it's, I spend a lot of time doing this. It's but spiritually, my mission is to help people accomplish their mission. So for myself, my personal, professional, my spiritual journey are 100% intertwined into what I do on a daily basis. But it's just very simple. So my personal mission awareness, Mission Matters, mission amplification, spiritually, mission accomplishment. I mean, just 2 words in each of those categories, but very simple, very straightforward. And that's essentially what you want to start off with at the forefront. So these are just questions that you want to be able to address. What do you do? Why do you do it? How do you do it? And how do you help people? 4 very simple questions, and you should be able to address these questions in 1 to 2 sentences. And just to give you an example, I mean, I think on TikTok and especially people's attention spans are like seconds. You got 3 seconds, 5 seconds to be able to keep people's attentions. And that's how much time you want to be able to address who you are and what you do and do it in a more compelling way. But just to use this as a framework.
I like want to take pictures of all your slides. They're so good.
And then you want to make your statement unique and you want to be bold and memorable. So I shared mine's, right? Again, my personal mission is to help you identify what your mission is and make it very simple. Then we want to amplify that mission, and then we want to help you accomplish that mission. So that's Mission Matters in a nutshell. So this is where you can kind of be creative. And there's tons of examples. And the beauty with all this AI technology, ChatGPT, you can make it your friend where you can basically bounce ideas off of ChatGPT, and it could even help write you some, provide you examples. So just as an FYI, one key resource that can be useful for you. You want to make your statement authentic to who you are, and so simple that a child could understand what it means. Again, I simplified my core message into 2 words in each of those different categories. So, or 3 words, I guess, right? Because we amplify stories. Part of this is also designing your visual identity. So you want to figure out what elements of your brand design, color palette, font, logo, headshot, you want to be consistent. So I have one headshot that I use on everything, on every social platform. When I sent Danielle my bio and my photo, I use that across the board on every single thing. So that's the only one image that you'll find for me because it's centralized around that. And if I decide to change it later on, then I'm going to change everything. So it's going to be universal.
Wow.
Same thing with your color palette, for like Mission Matters, for example, it's orange and black. We've been consistent with this brand since day one, and everything that we do, we have a, design and font palette. So we kind of have our consistent fonts. You want to do this with your logos, and you want to be, I believe you should be as neurotic about this as possible, only because this is the one consistency that you're going to have across the board where people will be able to identify you over and over again. And so it's essentially it's what'll resonate with your audience, and it's just they'll just be consistent reminders for who you are and what you're doing. Part of this is also now understanding the tone. So is it more formal or casual? And so part of this is, the reading level, slang usage, word to use or not use, type of humor. All of this is consistent, and it should be all consistent in your style guide. So, there are some brands where it is okay, right? Because this is, again, if you know your audience, like if you're doing something that's a little bit more into hip hop or complex con, then it's okay to be a little bit more informal and use slang language. If your style is just more comedic and it's more natural to you, and you use humor consistently in your daily usage, then it's okay to use humor. This is, again, understanding who you are and what you're doing and who your audience is, because you want it to be authentic to who you are. And so this is all part of the process that you go through as well. So the third component behind this is that you want to create content that expresses your personal brand. And so once you kind of understand who's your target audience, number 2, who are you and why are you doing what you're doing? And number 3 is, how do you get your message to that audience now? And so the content, it ultimately helps you build the brand, trust, authority. It'll allow you to create leads, generate leads. If you're raising capital, it'll allow you to do the same thing. And the whole goal behind all of this is you want to really identify what the problem is and how you can solve that problem in its most fundamental way. And so give you an example. I actually had the opportunity with a lot of, like, even these talks that I've been giving, I even had the opportunity to go to Mongolia and be able to share this message out there with some leaders. And so these are just some photos that I had a chance to share with you all. But the whole point of this is you want to create content ideas that are consistent. And I have a bunch of platforms that I'm going to go over in just a moment. But part of this is, you basically want to figure out what are the solutions that you're addressing. And then there's a variety of different content pieces that are going to be important. So number 1, it's you really want to know what the problem is and what the solution is. Another form of content is creating case studies and testimonial content on how you've been able to help one individual person or many people. Some other ideas are webinars, kind of like this. You want to be able to tell your story, and you want to make the content personal for you. So one of the easiest, I guess, hacks, or one of the easiest ideas that I can share with folks is, if you're confused about what type of content you create, I would suggest just documenting your life and your everyday with what you're doing and how you're doing it. So let's say if you're building a lifestyle brand, let's say you're building a fashion wear brand. Let's say you've got a brand that you're going to create shoes. What you're doing is just, it's like a day in the life where you're consistently just creating content of like, hey, I just had this meeting with this manufacturer, and this is kind of what I've learned. All you're doing is documenting your daily life of what's happening. And if you're confused about creating content, maybe that's all you have to do, is just make it more simple and just highlight, like, I just had a meeting with the manufacturer, and this is what I've learned about, from that meeting. Or I just had a meeting from an investor, and this was one thing that came up, and this is just what I learned. And so all you're doing is just taking photos as you're moving along in your day. So the documentary style content, it kind of resonates with your audience because you're showcasing who you are and what you're doing, and what's like, it's more like behind the scenes of how you got to where you are. And if you do this consistently enough over like even the span of a year, not only for yourself, but your audience will be able to see how you're growing and what you're learning along the way. And so it's just a way to kind of consistently build community. So that's my one simple tip, is if you're ever confused on content, just document your life. That's a sure, I think it's almost foolproof that you're gonna resonate with your community, because they'll understand who you are, what you're doing, and how you're looking to build what you're doing as well. So when it comes to some tips, you want to be consistent at creating content. We have a lot of clients that host and launch podcasts. What we always advise is you want to be very consistent at posting content. Like if you're posting a podcast episode once a week and you're posting it on Thursday, you want to be able to post content once a week on Thursday. Like that should be part of your DNA and just ingrained in what you're doing as well. So you want to focus on offering and value, and don't promote unnecessary. So you don't want to sell, you want to more educate, especially this is just how people consume information nowadays. And you want to create with your personal branding goals in mind. So essentially what that means is, again, who's authentic to who you are. You want to be able to be genuine, because the more genuine, the more authentic you are, the more people that'll resonate. And bottom line is, be able to buy from you whatever product, service it is, or whatever your goals are that you're looking to achieve behind this. So now I want to dive into the platforms. So this is, how do you communicate with your brand message where your audience will hear it? So what are the platforms that exist, and which ones do you focus on more than others? And so, it really comes down to who your audience is again, and your capacity to publish. So these are all different examples. One form of communication is going to be through a blog post. So articles that you can write. Anyone here can create a blog. There's a platform called medium.com, which is very easy to use. LinkedIn has its own article platform as well. So you can create content there. You can always create your own personal website and create a blog there. And so what you want to do is share ideas, and especially now with ChatGPT, if you want, or if you're kind of confused on what people are searching for, one of the things that I use is I use a platform called answerthepublic.com. And let's say, for example, you type in the word real estate on answerthepublic.com. It'll tell you the top 100 or 200 questions that are asked in the entire real estate industry. So if you're confused on what blog post should I create, if you just answered those questions, you have 100 questions, 200 questions right there. That's 200 blog posts that you can write about answering those specific questions. So and then if you're confused on, okay, well, how do I build some framework around this? Well, guess what? ChatGPT exists too. And so now you can ask those questions on ChatGPT and get ideas and to build off of that. So now that's you creating content, consistently, and using AI to your advantage now. Another platform, so this is our Mission Matters. And so we actually are always looking for contributors. So if anyone, we reach about, I think we get about 60, 70,000 uniques a month to our website. So if anyone wants a platform to build off of, Mission Matters is always looking for contributors too. Social media. So there's a lot of platforms that exist, and you want to build an engaged audience and get to know them. And so there's multiple social media platforms, right? The biggest ones being Facebook or Meta, right? Threads, X or Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, Snapchat, Pinterest. I forget which ones I'm missing. LinkedIn, right? All of these are very important platforms. And what you want to figure out is who is your audience, because your audience will dictate what platforms you focus on. So if you're focused on a younger demographic and you want to really target Gen Z, TikTok might be the platform that you may want to focus on more. If you have something that's visually aesthetic or any type of product that, maybe it's Pinterest, maybe it is Instagram, maybe it is TikTok, right? All those platforms have a visual display there. If you're creating content that's very educational and you're teaching people different things, then it could be YouTube, could be the platform you focus on. So you really, number one, again, this is why it's so important to know who's your audience and then what are you doing, because those platforms, there's different platforms that have different types of audiences that you can kind of build off of, just so you understand. And so this is an example of a bunch of social media posts. So we published a Woman in Business book, and this is like all of the content that they collectively ended up, publishing and writing about. So getting into this, you want to make sure the multimedia is important too, because especially nowadays, video is how most people consume information. And so video, audio, which is with podcasts, visual content with photos. So those are the three different types of mediums that you want to create content for. And so how people consume information now is with video. So it's essentially easy to kind of create. Just use your phone. You don't need anything fancy anymore, which is the beautiful thing about all this. Podcasting is probably the one example, and I think it's the ultimate hack in marketing that allows you to post everything everywhere. So these are about 10 of our clients that we've launched podcasts for.
Wow.
Reason why this is so valuable and important is because if you do specifically a video podcast, you basically can create content on every platform. So let's say you record a 30-minute video podcast episode, right? Number one, it's live on all the podcasting channels. There's about 40 major ones, from your Spotify, Apple, Google, Amazon, etc. There's a solid, strong SEO play as to why you even set up a channel there, because people can, when they Google your name, all of these different platforms will pop up, and it's just driving more traffic to who you are. So the podcasting channels, that video content, now you can publish that long form content on YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all the social media channels. More specifically, let's say you have a 30-minute video podcast, you can cut that podcast episode. I'm sure many of you have seen, 5-second, 10-second, 20-second clips on TikTok and Instagram and LinkedIn and YouTube Shorts. You can take 5 to 10 seconds and find some golden nuggets throughout that 30-minute episode. And you can even cut it up into 20 different segments. So now you have 20 pieces of social media content that you could publish almost once per day. So you're recycling and repurposing that content many times over. So that's social media. You can take that podcast episode, transcribe it. There's a lot of AI that now just does it for free. And now you can turn that into a blog post itself. So now you got blog post content. If you're sharing anything newsworthy in that one podcast episode, now you can write a press release based on that episode itself. If you're doing any form of advertising, you can even turn those 5-10 second clips into social media ads on YouTube and Facebook with a call to action at the very end of it. If you are not sending out an email newsletter already, well, guess what? Now you have a reason to send out an email newsletter, because every single time a podcast episode comes out, now you're able to engage your community because you're educating them. So you're literally at 7 different platforms, all utilizing one source. So you're maximizing your time. I think it's by far the most efficient and effective way to connect with your audience, because it's not only the podcasting platforms that exist, it's everything else that exists. So that's number one. Number two is I've been asked this quite often is, aren't there a lot of podcasts out there? There are, but to give you perspective behind this, there's about 5 million podcasts that exist right now, according to, I think it was like Apple or Spotify, whatever platform it is. There's about an 80% drop off in content creators after 3 to 4 months, because it's a lot of work to manage all this. So if you just do the math right there, there's about 1 million podcasts that are consistently creating content beyond 6 months. Now, think about that for a second. What's happening across the entire industry is that there's way more content creators, there's a lot more advertisers, and there's way more listeners. So the whole pie is just enlarging as a whole when it comes to podcasting, as the data's clearly been showing over the last decade. Secondly, let me compare this to YouTube. So in comparison, today, there's over 117 million YouTube creators that exist right now. And that's only growing. So if you put that into perspective, I believe that in 10 years, 20 years, there's not only going to be a million podcast creators consistently creating content. I think there's going to be tens of millions of people that are going to have podcasts. And so if you start now, you're just going to get ahead of the curve. And this is where you can kind of build up your audience, because it's what YouTube was back in 2006, 2007, when there were only millions of creators.
Wow.
Now there's over 100 million creators right now that exist. So just to give you perspective on where I see the trends headed. And then you can expand your audience. So another form is not only you launching a podcast, but being a guest on other people's podcasts. We have a podcast and we're always looking to bring guests onto our show. So if you're a founder, if you're an investor, if you're an executive of a larger company, feel free to reach out. I'm happy to see what, to bring you on as a guest on our podcast. We're going to interview over 2,000 people this year alone. And so definitely feel free to reach out. You guys will get my email and all my information. I'll put it in the chat actually, so that you guys can feel free to reach out whenever you want.
And honestly, it's such a fun, Adam's like, he's just so, he's easygoing, a great conversationalist. He's so good at what he does, but it's a great exercise for those of you that feel awkward putting yourself out there or telling your story. It's like a journey. It's a process. You have to start. So by like doing something like this, like my husband is the CEO of a very large company, but he is such an introvert. You'd never know it. He'd get mad at me if I said this, but by going through those exercises, it's amazing just learning to tell your own story, but then the way people respond and the way you inspire. And so, yeah, I think this is amazing. You guys make this opportunity available.
Absolutely. Happy to be a resource, of course. Another example, another important thing, and this is the old true tried methods that have always worked. Publishing a book is really hard. It's gotten a lot easier now because there's a lot of technology that can help. But the bottom line goal is, number one, people don't throw away books. Mm-hmm. Books are always here. They're always going to be around forever. And the thing is, people will always put that book on a bookshelf. So when you hand someone a book, what I always suggest and recommend is use your book as a business card, basically, because it showcases your expertise. And if you've taken that much time to put that entire book together, it's going to be memorable and it automatically allows you to stand out. Like, we have so many clients that have literally doubled their consulting fees, that have gotten speaking opportunities just because they can say that they're a published author. So it's one of the most powerful things that has always worked and still works to this day. And I don't think that's ever going to change either. And so we published a variety of books, hence we have a whole book publishing division. So something that we can keep up with directly. So identified essentially the 4 steps for building that personal brand, right? And how you can increase sales and impact and whatever your goals are. These are the 4 that I went over. It's really deciding who you want to reach to your target audience, presenting your chosen image. So knowing your own brand, you've got to create content. And then the goal is, where do you post that content? And it's, again, the reason why the most important aspect behind this is, deciding who you want to reach and presenting your image and what your vision and mission is. Then create that content. And then based on all of that, you'll know where to post that content based on that audience and based on your core message of what you're doing. So kind of, that's the wrap up, but happy to answer any questions, of course.
Oh my gosh, that was amazing, Chirag. I have my own whole entire page of questions. The chat is like blowing up with people being like, can we have these slides? This is just amazing. I'm drinking out of a fire hose, But there are a few questions in here already from others, so I won't be selfish. I'll start with these questions. But thank you. That was honestly, it's like, learned a lot. Thank you.
Absolutely.
All right. So the very first question, which came earlier in your presentation, was how do you summarize what you do when you have a diverse experiences and skill sets?
Great question. So it comes down to several things. Number one, who's your target audience? And then number two, what are you looking to do from this? So I'll give you an example. Like I have a friend, or also a client rather. He's an investor, but he also runs his own CPA firm on top of that. And
Mhm.
so when he's talking to folks, in some instances, he wants to wear the investor hat because he wants to get better deals. In other instances, he wants to get clients for his CPA firm. And so it kind of comes down to contextually, what are you focused on, and who are you talking to, and why are you talking to them, right? Because if you have this diverse array of skills, I guess the main question is, what are you trying to achieve, right? Because based on what your goal is that you're trying to achieve, then you can kind of figure out who should you be talking to based on that. I don't know if that like resonates or if that makes sense.
It's almost
But
reverse
you can be,
engineer, starting with the end goal. Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
how I would do it, because there's multiple ways to approach that where, I kind of shared my story, for example, right? Where I was in the nonprofit sector, and then I was in media and marketing in the luxury space. And then I went a little bit more mass market and, and personal branding instead of market, company branding. So
Mhm.
depending on who I'm talking to, I can kind of, it's like a Swiss Army knife, right? Like I have specific skill sets. If I'm talking to a nonprofit, I'm going to share a lot more examples of my experience in working in the nonprofit industry and how that resonates into marketing. If I'm talking to someone that's in the lifestyle space that runs a jewelry brand, I'm going to highlight the fact that my I was in the luxury lifestyle industry for 8 years, and I come from a family of jewelers. My dad's a diamond wholesaler, and it's a 5-generation business. I'm going to bring that out, and I'm going to share that part of my story. So you kind of have to, it's always a case by case basis where you have to know when to bring certain things up based on the conversation or the context of what's happening.
This is kind of cool because this is a lot about how we talk about family offices. No two are alike. So you really have to do your research so you know who you're talking to. And you really have to like personalize that messaging. It's really catered to that person and what their values are. And so I love your analogy of the Swiss Army knife. Totally going to use that again. But Marie, great question. Feel free if you have any follow-up based on what Chirag shared. From Jewel, book publishing, self versus traditional. Thoughts on this in terms of impact?
Okay, great question. It's situational. The holy grail is it's always nice to get a bigger book publisher to come after you, but there's definitely costs and benefits behind this. The cost is time. If you're
Mm,
going traditional book publishing route, you have to get a book agent and you have to convince them firstly. So you have to put a book proposal together. And so there's a whole process there. Average time span, I think it depending on the situation is like 3 to 4 years to getting a book done traditionally, if you get accepted by one of the 5 big book publishers, assuming. There's a lot of variables that they look at. One of them is how big is your social media following in your clout? What's your level of expertise?
mhm.
Your connections, no question. It's all about connections and who you know and who knows you in that space. If you can get one up. In those situations, sometimes they'll promote the book and they'll get it out there and they'll help increase book sales. Sometimes they'll even pay you in advance. But again, there's a lot of variables that come into play there. So that would be great, right? If they can help promote the book. The problem is the time. On the flip side, with self-publishing, you have full control and you can publish that book whenever you want. So you can try the traditional way to do things, or you could just get it done and then basically leverage that book to show your clout. Because you can always, if you're publishing a second or third book, you can try going the traditional route too.
Yeah.
So look, worst case scenario, I would say if you don't know the entire process, it's gonna take a lot longer.
Mhm.
And so anyone can publish a book and go on Amazon and get it published, basically.
Yeah.
So
That you answered the question right after it was posted, but it was how long? And I had the same question. I mean, what a journey. But I was thinking about it when you said that's kind of where you guys started with Adam.
mhm.
It does, it takes commitment, but I'm sure like that's the foundation for your
Yep,
clarity in everything you do. And if you dedicate yourself to that process, I'm sure it's going to shine through in all of your marketing and branding. So
completely. Yeah, so
yeah,
I guess to answer Margaret's next question,
yeah.
it took Adam about 1 year to get the first book done, just
Mhm.
because we didn't know what we didn't know. It was a total pain in the butt. We hired vendors, editors that just were not the right editors, and so wasted time and money dealing with them to then find other ones. Now fastest we published a book, a full book, was 3 months from start to finish. That book was ghostwritten, but essentially 3 months on average for us, it's like 6 months is pretty normal. It depends on how fast, someone wants the book done. Some, like, we're doing a full research driven book, which is just going through like multiple rounds of edits, and that book's probably going to take about a year. So I would say for us, 3 to 6 months is pretty normal. If you're writing it yourself, just it took Adam a year to get that first one done. So it's always it just depends on the situation. And Margaret's follow-up question was, do you sell your book in Amazon or where? Yeah, we do. We sell it on Amazon, upload it on Amazon directly, and then we also promote it through like Barnes and Nobles, and there's a bunch of other like online platforms. Amazon's by far the biggest step. So do you provide guidance on how to write sections of a book? We do. Yeah. So like one of the things that we do is there's three processes in how to work with us on the book publishing side. The first one is the ghostwritten book, which is you don't have any time at all. You just want to interview someone. You want a professional writer to write it in your voice, in your tone, in your way and style. The second option is like a book coach, a book consultant that's going to provide you a framework and answer questions and going to walk you through the whole book publishing process step by step. You're essentially writing the book, but then you're going to get the help and support to get the book done. The third way to work with us is essentially you write the book, but then we edit the book and publish it for you. So we'll take your Word document or Google Doc and then translate that into a book format and, design the book cover and all the other logistics there. And then we can help market and promote the book thereafter, depending on whatever the goals are.
That's awesome. Choose your level. I'm curious, when it comes to all the personal branding stuff, there's so many ways, and avenues like we talked about. Is it important to have like a business page and a personal page, and do you promote both, and do you show up differently? Like how do you manage that? Like, because I know LinkedIn, you've got the personal and the business, but also like in terms of a website, do you want to have a personal website? How important is all of that?
Depends contextually on the situation, but it all helps and benefits. So I believe you should create your own personal website because it, number one, highlights and summarizes everything you're doing, and provides you a full blueprint as to who you are and why you're doing it and what you're doing, what you're working on. The technical aspect behind this is that it's SEO. So when people Google your name, it should be one of the first things that pop up, along with all of your social media feeds. Even with all the social media channels, you should, I believe, set up a personal and also a company, all of the social media accounts, and make it all consistent. Now, when it comes to posting on the content, here's the one thing that you have to take into account is that if you're managing multiple social media accounts, or let's say you got the company branding and the personal branding, it's going to be time, right? So it's just time, allocation of money and resources. In order to maximize it, absolutely, I would say definitely take advantage and publish content on both platforms, especially if you have a team that's supporting you. Then yes, definitely, because then you kind of have to do everything, right? Like I would like all of the different examples of like publishing a book, launching a podcast, managing all the social media accounts. That's all the forms of marketing that exist now. And like part of the plan is to basically you want to be in all of those platforms, especially if you're looking to build a personal brand. So I would say you want to check every box. But again, it comes down to what's your budget, right? And what's your time allocation, and how do you maximize your time? If you don't have the budget to hire a full marketing team and you're the one managing this yourself, then you have to be very targeted. And this is why it's more important than ever to know who's your target audience and what's the core message you want to get across. Because based on those two variables right there, you should be able to know what platforms to focus on, more than others.
Awesome. I'll read it because it's kind of longer, but Jewel, I love it. He knows his target audience. It focuses on Black male corporate manager and directors looking to reach senior leadership, new job coaching offer. I have my colors, podcast, newsletter, and post daily on LinkedIn. Any thoughts on specifically what content generates the most inbound leads of individuals DMing me about services?
Love your any thoughts on what content generates the most inbound leads? So this is how we built Mission Matters. I'll basically give you our blueprint. And it was kind of by accident, but I've been in marketing for long enough to know that the numbers have been amazing. So when we first launched our podcast, we basically were interviewing one guest per day. It was a 15-minute podcast episode, so it was very short. We literally would record the content and just publish it on the platform because we didn't have a team to edit or anything like that. And we kind of learned on the fly. We realized that for every 10 guests that we interviewed, we got one client out of that.
Wow.
The conversions today are still true. We've interviewed over 6,500 executives, founders of companies on our podcast, and we have over 1,000 clients. And the reason is that we weren't even selling. We were just providing a value add opportunity where we were just sharing people's stories, right? Again, we amplify stories. We're sharing their story, addressing it, and promoting it through our platform. People organically were seeing that we have a book publishing division in our company because that's how we started the company. And they would inquire and they would ask us about, hey, I'm interested in publishing a book, or I've always wanted to publish a book. I want to learn more information. That's how we got all of our clients. So a lot of the guests that you're interviewing, I would suggest pinpoint your target audience and start building a rapport and relationship with them. And I guess I would need to see what type of content you're creating, because I would need to see what you're talking about. But basically, in our situation, I can use ourselves as like examples. We're specifically just highlighting on how to maximize your story, how to publish your story. In your case, I guess you're focused on like HR, right? It sounds like it. Senior leadership, new job, coaching offer. So if you're only focused on that, then you want to position yourself as a thought leader, as the expert in that specific field. And so you want to create content that exists. An easy way to do this is I would use I think I got asked this, answerthepublic.com.
Yeah, that's awesome. I can't wait to go check that out.
Type in your industry to answerthepublic.com. I put it in the Zoom chat so you guys can all see that. I would just put that in and just put like HR, real estate, like whatever industry you're in, and it'll tell you what are the top 100, top 200 questions that are asked based on that category. Gosh. And then I would just answer questions on that, and that's your 100 to 200 pieces of content to create right there.
Amazing. Awesome.
What will be the cost of the third method where I write the draft and you edit and publish it? It depends on how long the book is. So word count and also word count, page count matters. And then secondly, if you need us to, I guess, create your graphics for the book, like the book cover itself, and then upload it on Amazon. If it's just editing, the ranges, it could, again, really depends on how long the book is. So it could range from like a few $1,000s up to like $20,000. We edited a 500-page book, so that was a lot more work than editing a 50-page book, right? So
wow, amazing.
What's a good book size in terms of pages? People have short attention span these days. I think it depends on what your goal is. So if your goal is you want to position this as like really as a thought leader, an expert, and you're writing a full book and you're providing a blueprint and you're highlighting your expertise on a specific subject matter, it doesn't really matter how long the book is because you want to showcase your expertise, right? So if you're writing a book for a very specific audience, that's one category. If you're writing like your life story because you want to speak on stage and you want to inspire as many people as possible, like a Tony Robbins, then maybe it is just until your story gets across, right? So it's I wouldn't base it off of people's attention spans. I would base it off of the content you're creating and why you're doing it. And if you're able to get your entire message across, so if it ends up being 150 pages, or if it ends up being 300 pages, but you're providing the full blueprint as to how you can help people, people will read that book anyways. To be honest, I don't think most people will read books anyways. Like I hand copies of books to people. They may not read it, but what usually ends up happening is they'll think of you as an expert in the space. So they'll reach out to you for your product or service, whatever it is that you're offering.
And the sheer fact of doing it, you become an expert by that point, whether you are or aren't,
Yeah.
Of the calling card, like that's your new business card. It's brilliant.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like in managing everything that's required, does Mission Matters take care of that, or do you recommend an internal team? Do you advise against like virtual assistants or outsourced? What are your thoughts there?
I believe there's a lot of reasons to use agencies. Definitely because it's gonna, like, for example, if you don't really have much of a team right? And you don't have as much experience in marketing, to go out and hire all of the positions that you would need on a full marketing team, right? It's going to be very expensive. Like, I'll give you an example. With a lot of our podcast clients, anyone that's doing a video podcast specifically, we have 7 people on our team that are involved in that each client, right? Difference is we have economy of scale because we have over 100 clients that we're managing. So so each of our staff is then supporting, 10 plus podcasts, right? Whatever the number is.
Right.
In this situation, if you have to go out and hire a video editor, hire a social media person, hire a copywriter, hire your audio engineer, and then hire a project manager to do all the posting and make sure the job's getting done, that's going to be very expensive.
Yeah.
So it's situational. I would advise, if you can afford it, to start hiring internally for certain positions, but certain positions I don't think they make sense. I think you can find the right agency or the right consultant or freelancer to then help you, and again, whatever the goal is that you're looking to achieve.
Awesome. Well, I know we are coming to the top of the hour. This has just been awesome. I can't wait. How do you feel about sharing the slide deck with people? That was a question. I definitely will. I mean, I love to ask, what is the best way for people? Oh, amazing. To get a hold of you.
Put my email address in the
Okay.
chat. Feel free to add me on LinkedIn as well. I'll just share
Awesome.
that right now.
Are you all right with me sharing that in my follow-up? I'll email,
Please.
I'll put, some of the takeaways from this awesome conversation. I'll put a link to the recording. And that's really actually how you can access the slides. You guys will all get the recording. And yeah, we'll make sure you have the contact information. And yeah, this has just been awesome. I know I'm inspired. Yeah, anyone have any last minute things? All right. Well, amazing. Thank you so much for this presentation, for your time, your expertise. Yeah, it's been an awesome presentation.
Well, thanks everyone. Happy to assist, and feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thanks everyone for joining us. Until next time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.